When we awaken, ascend, elevate into not necessarily remembrance in the sense of having specific forgotten memories return, but into knowing again, knowing the truth of our eternal situation. We put aside the hacks we have relied on while not knowing, and we redefine our terms. I'm here to help with that. Rationalists. Space-time is a hack. In setting that hack aside, we do not lose these spatial dimensions and one moment following another. We never lose them. God believers. The word God is a hack. It is a very old hack of ours. Much, much older than that of space-time. And in setting this hack aside, we do not lose the love, the grace, the higher knowing that does watch over us. We never lose that. We never lose that. It's just not what you think. That's all. It's just not what you agreed to think it is. It's actually better than that. The truth of it is so much better, so much more than the word God encapsulates. The word God actively gets in the way of that truth, which is so much better than the word God. Does that make me heretical? Well, if the word heretical refers to one who denies the existence of the great God Almighty, the great Most High, who is the all-glorious Creator God, then yes, of course it makes me heretical. This Jesus is Jesus the Heretic. And he is proud to be so because he loves the child. As God believers, you think that our survival as individuals is in doubt. You think that your inclusion is in doubt. But that is not the nature of it at all. This cycle of forgetting and then relearning that we, the eternal, go through. There is as little need to doubt your own survival and inclusion in eternity as there is when you breathe in to put time and energy into wondering about if you will breathe out or not. As there is as little need when the sun sets to spend the night pacing in worry over whether it will rise again. The very last thing that the eternal need doubt is its own survival, and your inclusion in eternity can never be in doubt. And it is not that we all go together. It's that we are all already here together. Always have been. Always will be. No matter how many avatars we go through. It is not about where we go, where we are headed. It's about what we bring to ourselves. Bring to ourselves here. Bring to ourselves now. And it is about what we simply bring here with us as ourselves. This is what it is to be eternal, to be the eternal. You may feel it will break your heart to put aside the ideas you have about the divine and the angels exactly as you have conceptualized them, exactly as you believe them to be, and say that they must be. But the breaking of the heart, when it comes to releasing lies, it is the breaking of the heart that is the healing of the heart. Let's take, for example, the biggest example, the Bible. So many of you are under the thrall of that book. So many questions asked back and forth by the theologians about that book. The culture of that book lies heavy and deep in our collective psyche. How could we possibly ever emerge from under the weight of that almighty hack? Some, no doubt, will have to wait for their next avatar before that can happen for them. But for the rest of us, it really only takes one simple question for us to help us find the willingness to release it, to help us allow acknowledgement of the lie and embrace the breaking of the heart that is the healing of the heart. And that question is this: can you name a book that has caused more harm and continues to cause more harm to children than the Bible? There is no such book. There is no such book anywhere that you can name. No such book that you can say, this book here, this one has caused and continues to cause more harm to children than the Bible has caused and continues to cause. That book does not exist. You can sit down and think about it for as long and as hard as you like, and you will not think of a single published title that can claim that specific place above the Bible. Nor the book comes remotely close to competing with the Bible on this score. And that is all I need to know. That is all that anybody who is coherent needs to know. And the words of that book are never going to change. In the cognitive shift of moving from lie to truth, the breaking of the heart is the healing of the heart. Acknowledging we were lied to by the one we trusted. This is not restricted to believers in the Bible at all, not by a long shot. None of us are exempt from the breaking of the heart that is the healing of the heart. None of us are exempt from the heartbreak of coming to know that we were lied to by the ones we trusted. Because none of us are exempt from the heartbreak of coming to know that the one we should have been able to trust in the most, ourself, has lied to us for the longest time. And yes, the breaking of the heart, that is the healing of the heart, it is a painful shift. A healing that brings tears of pain, tears of anguish. I already know. I know it really well. I've been through it myself. And I have gone through it alone. In terms of this physical world and the physical people in it, I've gone through it alone. And guess what? Life continues on afterwards. Life continues, and the potentials that were muffled, stifled under that thick blanket of lies, they are smothered no longer. It hurts, and the hurt is the healing. And so we are then freed to walk forth into our eternity, unshackled from those old lies, ready to find out what next, on our own terms. And so we reach that place where we must set our hacks to one side and redefine our terms. Let us do that now. Let's redefine some terms. The dark ones, the evil ones, those people who we think of as the very darkest in intent. Do you know who they really are? These people, so many of us would damn to hell if we could. Do you know who and what they really are? Would you like to? They are our children. They are our children. Plain and simple, and in the most literal of senses. The journey of self-polarization that we cannot avoid entering into together, the great amnesia of our eternal past. We do enter into it as one collective, one organism, one tribe, one people, one family. We enter into it together, and we know as we do so that this great amnesia is not a glass ceiling above our heads that we must shatter so that we may proceed onwards. It is sludge. To us, It is a sludge, a thick and heavy sludge. It is a sludge ceiling that we expand towards and can only dig and burrow our way through. We have done it many times before. We will do it many times again. And naturally, it is the older selves amongst us who take on the task of pushing themselves painstakingly through the sludge and to the surface first, so that they may then turn back around, reach back into the sludge as best they can, and pull our children, who are still struggling in the lower levels of the sludge, up and out. We are a tribe, a family in amnesia. Those of us that are older look after those of us that are younger. Not politically, just naturally. Let those of us who are not so confused simply care about those who are more confused. I am here not to prove the Bible right, but to prove it wrong. I am here, and to be coherent with that is only to be coherent with what is actually happening, rather than just not knowing what is happening. At long last, I am here to advocate for the child, not for God. I am here to advocate for the child, the eternal child, and no single living being is not the child. When we problem solve for mortality, we play the short game, and we lose the game that we are actually in, which is the long game, the game called eternity. A thing to understand about me, a thing I am proud of about myself, a thing I wish for all of you to have for yourselves also, is that I am an absolutely selfish man. I am. I advocate for the very inversion of self-sacrifice. I advocate for the self-love that enables me to love other at all. As the eternal, I inherently and absolutely owe this to myself. And what it ends up looking like at our human level is always breathtakingly unique. Here I am, on my mount, and all that does really amount to is a quiet man talking quietly in the centre of a loud and crowded room. Our emergence from the lie culture of the great amnesia, it is truly not a thing to waste energy on doubting the happening of it, because it is a natural and inevitable process, like giving physical birth to a physical human baby is. And yeah, of course, that thought may fill you with terror at the process that lies before you. But you want to know something else. The only reason we make childbirth as horrific an experience for all involved as we can is that we know what it is to come into this world and not be loved for who we are when we arrive. But in truth, childbirth can and should be the beautifully challenging experience, not the harrowing experience. And so, may our birth, our collective birth from the womb of amnesia into the first day of knowing, may it be of the beautifully, really, truly, beautifully challenging processes for us. May we grant ourselves that grace as best we may. May you grant yourself that grace as best you may. The truth, the living truth, that is all that is, does not operate as a model of hierarchy. It operates as the model of innerarchy. Picture the colour sphere. The central nodal point of the sphere is pure equilibrium. That is where the simplest, most forceful, most absolutely in effect truth of the innerarchy is to be found. And the further from that core equilibrium the subsequent truths are, the less frequently they are in effect, until we reach that outer level of infinite self-differentiation of that simplest truth, where every single moment becomes a one-time only in effect in all eternity occurrence. The center of your being is the center of your past, the past that brought you into being and is still bringing you into being and will never not be bringing you into being. This living past is your soul, and it leads all the way back into the center of our shared soul. So, do not operate in accordance with an imposed hierarchical system, one in which the eternal is forever higher than you, but operate by your own innerarchical structure, the real and actual structure in which you know that it is that place at the center of you that is the eternal. What is above and beyond you is only the mystery of the unformed future potentials that forever await your influence, engagement, loving playfulness. So, you operating by the real and truthful structure of reality doesn't mean Okay, everybody, run along now and break the law. It doesn't mean go and cause trouble for a world full of confused children. It just means know where your innerarchy leads and be subject to the truth of that which is at once within you and behind you, and also below you, forever pushing you further and higher, and is just never going to stop or be stopped, rather than see yourself as being subject to the lie of an external force that is above you, better than you, and sovereign over you. Because that is just not the truth. It is just not the truth and never can be. So, from this place of knowing, one can and may navigate one's own path through eternity amidst a landscape of children in confusion, one's own children in confusion, while walking in one's own sovereignty. And the last thing you are going to do is go about the place trying to hurt and upset your own children. No matter how badly it may seem they are behaving. Your own children who are confused for reasons you completely understand, because you have been through that same confusion yourself countless times. You know what that shit looks like. You know what it feels like. You know what it tastes like. And it is good that you know, and it is good that you remember, because that means you can then help your own children through that shit, which is the very least they deserve. They are not criminals that should be damned to hell. They are the very opposite of that. What happens when we, the eternal, as a collective, rise into a new and higher order of scale of self-definition, self-differentiation than ever before, is that we forget everything that we did remember, start to relearn ourselves from scratch, and the energetic atmosphere around us, something I sometimes refer to as the holosphere. It thickens into a sludge of anxiety, fear, confusion, reactivity born of not knowing. And those of us who are relatively young struggle with this more than those who are relatively old. Not because they are less worthy, not because they are relatively bad, but for no other reason than that they are relatively young. They find themselves caught in the lowest, thickest levels of this sludge of misconception, while older souls claw their way higher. And when our young witness this happening, they can feel like they are being left behind, which can fill them with rage and despair. But they are not being left behind. On the psychological level, we, as our entire collective, need to hear this. We are not being left behind. Nobody is. The grown-ups just need to reach the other side, reach the other bank of the river, so to speak, before they can turn around and throw ropes, reach out their arms for their children. Those of us that some of us are so willing to paint as demonic, from the point of view of somebody only a little bit older than our children can, at this point, seem like the very demons of hell. While from the point of view of somebody significantly older, who is in the process of pulling themselves up and out of the sludge of self-polarization, the great amnesia, these demonic ones are nothing more than distressed children covered in shit. That is literally all they are. It is our own children, distressed and covered in shit and full of nightmares. And since when do we condemn our children for the sin of being our children? Let's talk about children, can we? What they are in and of themselves, and what they are to us. So, I am the least inclined person to invoke archetypes that have specifically religious overtones. I generally like to just steer clear of that kind of language if I can. But when it comes to referring to children, actual, real, physical children, and every single one of them at that, I have no problem, no qualms at all about applying the word sacred to them. Every single last one. My reason for this is straightforward enough. If I hold the archetype of the child as inherently sacred to myself, and naturally see all living beings as expressions of that archetype, then any actual physical living embodiment of the child can only be sacred in my eyes, can they not? But why should I hold the archetype of the child as sacred in the first place? Because I understand what it means to be both eternally indestructible and eternally sensitive. And I also understand what it means to have the amnesia of the newborn. I understand what it means to exist eternally through no fault or choice of my own, and that I forever only wish to feel better rather than worse. I understand that this is forever true of me, and just as much forever true of everybody else as it is forever true about me. I understand what it means that every other living being is very much a living extension of my own self and soul. Let us define child in metaphysical terms. A child is one who is freshly arrived here. Now, freshly arrived here is undoubtedly a relative, subjective term. Let us understand this relative, subjective term to cover those who are significantly more recently arrived here than an adult. And what shall we define an adult as? Let an adult be, in this conversation, one who is both fully developed physically and who, on the cognitive level, has come to the understanding that they are the eternal, inhabiting their own living human avatar here at the physical end of this current shared moment of ours. That is what an adult is in this conversation. If you do not meet these two criteria of adultness, then you should consider yourself as the child, the sacred, eternal child. If you do meet these criteria, then you should still consider yourself as the child, because you still are. Relative to those who are even longer established here than you by one or more order of scale of magnitude. But you are an adult to those who definitely do not meet both criteria. Natural statuses are just and only that. Natural statuses. There is no spiritual requirement for anybody to revere and admire the tallest person in the room, or the shortest person in the room, or the youngest, most newly arrived sacred child in the room, or the oldest, most ancient soul in the room. Let your reverence for the glorious possibilities of a coherent eternity simply be your reverence for whatever joy and beauty you and your existence do manage to bring each other freely. This is the way of the eternal, which is who we all are. What I would like to see on the wall of a non-compulsory school is something along the lines of this. You are the eternal child, and you are sacred. If you are not feeling sacred for any reason, let's hear it. P.S. Just because you are sacred does not mean we can give you everything you ask for right when you ask for it. We too are the sacred eternal child, and we do our best. At the time of the recording of these words, there is one fully realized adult in this world. One who meets the two criteria for adultness coherently enough to be able to recognize his own children for who and what they are. This is going to change. The population of adults will increase.